Yeah, so the freedom that I saw him have, I mean, of course, it comes with a lot of responsibility. Many times he got, opening shift phone calls that people were not coming in, so he was up at 4:30 going into the shop. But
Welcome everybody to another episode of The Roast. Today we've got Tony Graziella. Is that how you would say it?
that's that's funny. You're the second person that's done that. The name of the company is my grandmother's first name. Her
Okay.
name her name is Graziella. My name is Tony Ponte.
Okay.
But
Um,
totally, I need to start telling people that ahead of time.
well, the only reason I did that, we talked on the phone earlier, and it was because I noticed you had the other podcast, and through the time we had been talking on Instagram, I wasn't actually sure what your name was because just Graziella Coffee,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then I think he called you
He did in the
Tony
first
Graziella.
minute, and I didn't stop him. I probably should have, but I told him at the end of the show.
Gotcha.
But I got to start telling people right away because
Well,
I
we'll
was
put
on
like
laughing to myself.
Yeah, we'll put your name and like your at the bottom, not to confuse the two.
Nice.
That's it's funny. So we have a coffee shop, Lizzie's Cafe,
Mm.
and everyone thinks that's my wife's name. So that's like they're like, oh, so your wife? How's Lizzie? And I'm like, Lizzie's the daughter, you know. So
Lizzie is your daughter's name?
yeah, and actually, it's not even her name. Her name's Anna Elizabeth, and
Mm.
she's like gotten the nickname Lizzie.
Mm.
So really, it's no one's name, which
Nice.
is weird. When I was a kid, my best friend and a couple other people, my dad as well, they all go by their middle name. And I always said, I would never name my kid something and then go by their middle name or nickname.
Yeah.
And then sure enough,
Now your daughter goes by that. Yeah.
yeah,
That's good stuff, man.
yeah. All right. So basically, I just kind of want to get right into, how you came about coffee. Like what brought you like, interest into this field of business, because I mean, I'm sure you know as well as I do, it's not a get rich quick business or anything like that. It's really quite the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. If I was trying to get rich quick, I probably wouldn't have selected coffee, honestly. Maybe I would have went into finance or investment banking. I don't know what I would have done. Um, but I'll try to like summarize where I've been and what led me to making the decision to start the business in the first place. Honestly, it's a little bit of like family history combined with curiosity. Uh,
Hmm.
my parents owned a couple coffee shops as I was growing up, so I grew up in the back of a coffee shop. I worked at my parents' coffee shops. You know, as it's for the first 17, 18 years of my life, that's how I knew my parents as coffee shop owners, and that's how I knew my family as a coffee family. Not on the roasting side, which is what I'm doing, but on the retail coffee side, serving coffee. And it wasn't, you're talking about now 25 to 35 years ago, so coffee then is not what coffee is now.
Yeah,
You
absolutely, big difference.
My parents kind of got put out of business by Dunkin' Donuts coming up. So,
Mhm.
you know, in my generation, 25 to 29 to 35 year olds, we're used to seeing Dunkin' Donuts. It's just a staple. Whereas when my parents were in business, it was this new up and coming business that eventually like drove them and other mom and pop shops out of business. So
Yeah,
that's the world of coffee that they came up in. And that's the world of coffee that I grew up in. And that is one of the things that I'm most interested about in coffee is kind of the community that was built in their shops. When I
that,
worked there during the week or on the weekends, there were those people who were regulars. I live in the city in Brooklyn now, and in the city, there are neighborhoods where there are regulars in places like that, but not quite in the way that I experienced it growing up in I grew up in Torrington, Connecticut, which is a town of like 30,000 people.
yeah,
So a very different feel, but I always loved the hometown kind of mom and pop coffee shop vibe where it was a real community space. It was a space where people got together and spread ideas and yeah, so that's what I really enjoyed about the space that they created.
That's
So
awesome, man.
there's like the coffee side from my father's side of the family, and then there's the farming side from my mom's side of the family, which my grandfather and my grandmother came over from southern Italy. They were farmers there. They moved here, started working in factories, and then just settled down and lived the rest of their lives here. But for the first
Wow.
20-ish years of their lives, they grew up in Italy as farmers.
Man.
So kind of like marrying the idea of respect for farming and agriculture and to the idea of community space and coffee as a tool for engagement and community building, like marrying those two ideas to me was marinating in my mind for the longest time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it came out of those two ideas.
That that's awesome because that's really pure. I mean, that's like a long build as well. It's not like you were just brainstorming and um there seems to be like something about the purity of an idea that like comes from the roots. You know what I mean? Like that's really like I mean that makes a beautiful bio for something. You know,
Sure,
like
yeah.
really,
Good marketing, if
it,
nothing else.
it's a great mark. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, um, wow. So, so both of your parents are actually immigrants, both of them.
My
Your
grandparents
grandparents, okay.
on my
Sorry.
mother's side.
Okay, so still, I mean, that's fresh. I
Mm.
mean, I'm supposedly, I don't like to claim, you know, I'm supposedly half Sicilian, half Irish, but I'm sure that's been
Right.
muddled. And, you know,
Mm.
I try not to say that because I feel like that's what people like to do when they're not really, you know,
Yeah.
not really an immigrant.
Yeah.
Um, that's awesome. And, you know, I'm sure you know as well as I do, like there's something about being an immigrant that is like eye opening when you come to this country or, you know, when you're starting a business, like, you know, I'm from small town America, you know,
Mhm.
and everybody is comfortable as long as they have a good job and a truck.
Mm.
My wife is from another country. She's an immigrant. She's the, you know, first generation immigrant. All of
Mm.
her family lives in Mexico. And after she was living with me for about a year, she looked at me one day and I had this job. I was building cranes. It paid
Wow.
really well. And, but, you know, I worked 6 days a week. And, you know, I would say I was like, I don't know what the term would be, but I thought I had money and I really didn't, you know.
Mm.
And she said, "Why do you work like you do?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? Like I've got to work." She goes, "But this is America." I'm like, that doesn't. I don't understand what you're getting at. She's like, like you could live in America, like you can do anything. You don't
Yeah.
have to just work.
Mm.
And yeah, it kind of got my wheels turning. You know, I'd had interest, but like to merge actually trying to do something with, you know, stepping away from like a good job to like try to do
Yeah.
something.
That's such a different mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't come from people that are born here because life's pretty easy for us for the most
Yeah.
part.
My grandfather, for some reason, I mean, I know the reason, but I'm saying for some reason, he always tends to make fun of people who are American for some
Yeah,
reason. And I'm sure a lot of immigrants do this. They almost like laugh at people who've gotten complacent in their like Americanness
for
in
sure.
in this kind of way that they're born into we're born and we just go straight onto a path for most of us, right into college, and then we just go right into the workforce, and it's just a completely different way to life. Whereas
Absolutely.
if you're an immigrant and you come over here, you weren't part of the school system, so you're already outside of the system, and you kind of have to make your own way.
Yeah,
And
100%.
you have to decide daily, weekly, monthly what job you're going to be doing and where your money's going to be coming from.
Yeah,
So yeah, see, I resonate with that.
it's really cool. It's refreshing, and you know, it's funny because, and I will, and you know, obviously born and raised in America, but I do notice a lot of people that haven't done anything that are just day to day Americans, and
Mm.
they'll hate on people that run this. You know, these guys have all the gas stations, or these guys have all the restaurants, and really, I mean, they're doing far better. I mean, they've got far more drive, far, you know,
Sure.
I always thought it was really cool to be in control of, what you do.
So
Um,
she kind of like shook you a little bit and got you thinking about it.
yeah, and like I said, I had some ideas, but I just had no real intention. I
Mm.
think at that time I had seen my first Gary V video, some stuff like
Right.
that, and like, so I thought it would be cool. And I
Mm.
always knew like I wanted to do something. Um, but I have like a ton of, like my problem, everyone told me it was a problem. I would obsess over one thing. So like I'd get something that I liked and I'd obsess about it for probably 6 months until I burned
Sure.
myself out, and then I wouldn't do it at all.
Mhm.
And I've done that for multiple things. And of course, along the way, I made pomade. That was I crashed and
Right.
burned big time. Um, I've tried to do a slew of different things, and they just crashed and burned. But those words really did. That was like the pry bar to really, you know, actually step into my own. Um,
Yeah.
it hasn't come with any shortage of failures, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's such an interesting touch point to talk about is kind of the way that we view or can view as a society those things that, for example, in your life you've tried and failed.
Yeah,
And sometimes those are viewed as where you get obsessed with things for 6 months and then you stop. There's a certain school of thought where that views that as a failure and as someone who's not fully committed to something and someone who's not dedicated and someone who doesn't know what they want to be doing. Whereas, you have someone like Gary Vee who's preaching that the ability for you to change your mind
exactly. Yeah,
overnight is kind of like an advantage because you've done something, you've given it your all, and at some point you realize that this is not for me and I need to move on to the next thing.
exactly.
So, it becomes this conversation of does it make you wrong for bouncing around from thing to thing, or is that actually an advantage of yours where you can kind of let go of all the negative self-talk of I guess I wasn't good enough to stick it out, or I need to give this more time because if I quit now, people will think I'm a failure. Well,
Yeah,
all those conversations, it's so much harder to be like, I'm done, I'm moving to the next thing because you're not worried about what everybody else is saying about it. You're just doing what you feel to be right.
exactly. And it's funny, again, being in a small town, I know, you're in Brooklyn. There's probably a larger selection of people that are probably doing more than the average Joe. And like where I live, like I said, there's, I think 6,000 people. I mean, it's small. And
Yeah.
the only cities with 20 to 30,000 people are half an hour in different directions.
Mm.
It takes an hour to get to the next biggest city for the most part. Um, and everybody is pretty much ingrained in the same thinking. There's a couple people that own their own businesses. Um, and everyone else is kind of, they down all those ideas. And I actually found that um, people, I would listen to podcasts and people like Gary Vee because, they tell you like you need to keep good people around you and you need to have like-minded people around you. Well, when there isn't any,
Yeah.
you have to like use your resources. And it could seem funny the first time I thought about that. It's like, those are my friends that don't really know me, like, keep them
Yeah.
around. And that's helped a lot because, I mean, people are, definitely scared of what they think would be hard to do or what would be a failure for them and just implement it on everybody else.
Definitely. And then there's just that fear of the unknown as well.
Yeah.
It's, I'm sure if you stayed at your crane building job, you could see yourself being there for 10 more years and you'd be perfectly fine. And you could plan out what the next 10 years would be like based on your current salary and then add a couple percent to that every year. And then it's just so much easier to project out what the next 10 or 15 years would look like.
Exactly. Yeah. You can
But that
fit
doesn't really
in
mean
all
that
your.
you say it again.
I said you're right. I mean, you can budget everything out. I should be able to buy a house by this time. I should be able to. I guess everything makes sense. Maybe I'll get a boat by the time I'm 35,
Yeah.
and that's the majority.
And
Of
there's
course.
something great about that too, though. There is
Yeah.
something good about that. And I don't think one way is right or wrong. And maybe we could be doing it totally wrong. Who knows? But
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something beautiful about that way of living as well. But I think there are people like yourself and like myself and so many people out there who wouldn't be able to go through life without giving it a shot,
Yeah.
without
100%.
trying to create something.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to where my grandparents own their own business. So I was able to see, and they've done, very well for themselves. And I've been able to see the whole time, like, you know, they paid for all the dinners.
Mm,
They bought everybody the gifts, and it wasn't that. It wasn't the monetary thing. It's more of like
the
they were in
ability.
complete control all the time. And if they wanted to go to Florida for 6 months, they did. And if they,
Yep.
and nothing stopped them. And I didn't realize what it was as a kid, but now that I'm older, I'm so glad that there was at least one group, around that kind of influenced that.
Question for you. Did they talk about entrepreneurship? And they didn't even have to use that word, but did they talk about entrepreneurship and business ownership, or was it kind of just this thing in the background?
Never. So
Mm,
their thing was go to college. We'll pay if you get good grades. We'll pay for your college. We'll do all this stuff. I once I got to a certain age, I said, "Well, that's funny because they dropped out of high school. Both of them didn't finish high school, and had my dad at like 16 years old.
mm.
So like, if you were to be dealt those cards right now, like, hey, you're 16, you got a kid, and you don't even have a diploma.
Whoa.
Pretty tough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm playing video games in my parents' basement. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
At
And
that age.
so for me, I'm like, gosh, it's tough for them to say. But I also think that because it takes so much, it's hard for them to like just assume that someone else can do what they did. Not that
Sure.
it's ego, but that they know what the road looked like.
And also it's not that they don't believe that you could also do it. It's just they don't want you to have to go through that as well.
Yeah,
Or they don't want you to experience the opportunity of failure that exists in that space.
yeah, exactly. And I've tried to, I'll try to give tips or not tips to their business, but I'll try to have conversations or they own some properties, hey, could I rent this and that kind of thing. And you never really get a serious answer because to them, I'm still like a 3-year-old kid.
Yeah, yeah.
It's tough to be taken seriously by family too. And that's a
Mm.
tricky thing all in of itself.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the conversation I think we were having earlier, which was, it goes back to the people that are around you and the people that you keep around in the conversations with people that you have. It's that, your family, especially because you've spent so much time with them, you're they come to see you and interact with you in a very specific way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And your friends that you grew up with as well. If you don't actively say you're working on yourself and you're doing like self-development or whatever you want to call it, you go into therapy, you're going to church, you're working on yourself, and you're slowly evolving and learning lessons and doing a lot of reflecting and growth, but you're not showing up in your relationships with your friends and your family and speaking to those people in that kind of way,
Yeah.
then they're not going to view you as that person. They're going to view you as the person that they know that you were.
Yeah. I get that all the time.
And the hardest thing to do, and the hardest thing that I've had to do, and I'm sure you're dealing with it, is bringing yourself into those situations as the person that you are now, and and creating that space and interacting with people as you want to be interacted with, and not falling back into the old patterns.
Exactly. And this is actually, we kind of touched on this on the phone, and I'm sure I gave you information overload on the phone.
No, it's great. I love to learn.
Um, but I've been hesitant to bring everything forward because of that same thing. It's like the people around you, I'm sure, like the majority of the people on social media know you at the beginning.
Definitely.
So, and, I have, my job's already pretty public, my day job,
Mm.
as well as our coffee shop. People know because it's so small. So like some of the media stuff, I have been hesitant, even though I know I shouldn't be,
Yeah.
slightly hesitant to bring it forward because then people they say, oh, man, I can't believe Sean did that. That's stupid. Is he really? People are watching him review coffee. You know,
especially in a small town too.
for sure. And it's funny. We'll drive an hour down the road, and I'll do a review at a coffee shop, and I can stand out there on the corner and do the whole thing. And it doesn't matter who's
Yeah.
walking by. But if I were to do that in town, I'm like, make sure no one's coming down the street. Make sure
Yeah.
and um, that's one of the awesome things about where you are, though, as well, is you're pretty much random.
That's what I was thinking about as you were saying that. That was one of the things I remembered the most about when I moved to the city for the first time. When I moved there for an internship after junior year of college. So when I was like 20, 19 or 20, and I went there for 3 months, and I just remember being blown away by how little people cared about what other people thought.
Yeah,
And it kind of showed itself in fashion in a weird way, because if you're in the city, especially in the summertime, people are just wearing anything and everything that they want. And I
yeah,
finally realized that, fashion and I guess it, like, it correlates to life and business as well, but fashion specifically is all about whatever you're feeling and whatever you want to express, and however you want to show up to the world, you get to decide that.
yeah,
And nobody cares about what you're wearing at the end of the day. It's
yeah.
all about how you want to present yourself.
Here it is, and that's an interesting thing. There's like, if you want to like be a staple, and you can be whatever you want. There's not obviously not everyone follows the code, but it's pretty much boots,
Yeah.
Wrangler,
Hmm.
neon blue jeans. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and tons of, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a lot of guys I know, that's what they love.
Sure.
But gosh, it's literally like my wife, she thinks it's funny because she's from, like I said, Mexico, and there everybody, at least in her city, she's from Pueblo City, and I think I told you on the phone, there's like 4 million, 5 million people there,
That's a big
and
city.
no matter what their position is in finance or in their job, it doesn't matter if they do construction or if they work in a finance firm. They all wear button ups and slick their hair back, and
Mm.
that was really cool to me.
Yeah.
Here, you know, it's definitely different. So that's very freeing, being in a place where you can really just do whatever without judgment.
Totally. And I've kind of translated that into the business as well. And
Yeah.
the marketing of the business and whatnot. I used my personal social media account to like do one or two big blasts to be like, hey, I'm starting a business. And then I kind of just shut down my old personal account. It's deactive now, and it has been for a while,
Yeah.
just so I can kind of take that option out of the equation,
Yeah.
take that variable out. Like, not only I don't even have to think about people's reactions to the stuff that I'm posting, because if you chose to follow my business account,
Exactly.
then that was your choice to pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm not like bombarding you on my personal account with my business
Yeah.
information. So
And that's something, like you said, I mean, you take out the whole worry, but also, like you said, you don't feel pushy, because that does seem, and I'm, I was always hesitant, like when you first make like a Facebook page, just like invite all your friends.
yeah, exactly.
I don't know how many invites I get that I don't look at. And it's almost not that it's annoying, like you want to support everybody, but
Hmm.
definitely, like I definitely pay attention to what I choose to pay attention to more than what someone's asking me to,
Totally.
you know. So do you have any, not, I don't want to change the subject too much, but did you have any influences when it came to this? Is there something you saw aside from your family and your parents, that kind of put you on this path?
Definitely. I'll try to remember as many people as I can, but as far as like the most significance, going back to something that you said before about your grandparents, I remember that when I was growing up, my dad and my mom, no matter what event it was, or sporting event or camp or anything, they always had the freedom to leave work whenever they wanted to,
Yeah,
and to be at any game that they wanted to, because they didn't have to stay at work until 4 or 5 o'clock. If
exactly.
my dad knew that we had a game or something, he would go into the office a little bit early, or he would just not go to work that day. He would do whatever he had to do. So And same thing with vacation, like you're talking about with your grandparents. My parents weren't going away for months at a time, but we had the ability to go on like family vacations
Yeah.
in ways where I don't think it would have been possible in a regular job.
Start
And
with a regular job for sure.
yeah, so the freedom that I saw him have, I mean, of course it comes with a lot of responsibility. Many times he got, opening shift phone calls that people were not coming in, so he was up at 4:30 going into the shop, but
Yeah.
the freedom that I saw, the financial and the time freedom that I saw him have was amazing.
For
So
sure.
that was inspiring. And then as far as like inspiration to actually start the business goes, one of my best friends from college, Dan, him and his brothers are from Trinidad and Tobago, and they own a bean to bar chocolate making company. So they buy chocolate, cacao beans from a
Yeah.
couple different countries, from Peru and Madagascar, and I think it's Ecuador. And they make their own chocolate in the Bronx in a manufacturing space. But so they've been in business technically now, I think, for like 6 or 7 years. And they're in the Bronx now and they have their own manufacturing space. But back when they started was in after college when we graduated in 2013. We moved in together at the end of the year. So I lived with him for 3 years. And in that time, he started the business basically in our apartment.
Yeah.
So I got to witness him start the business in our apartment together, operate it, grow it with his two brothers, talk about it all the time. All we ever did was talk about the business and growth and possibilities and stuff like that. And then flash back to like 3 or 4 years before that when we were in college, all he would talk about was like starting a business, chocolate in Trinidad, all of these things.
Yeah.
And he was always like, you should start a business. We should talk about doing business. And then one day he was over my house and I told him that my parents used to own a coffee shop. And he was like, kind of blew his mind. And we looked up coffee that night. And he was like, it's such a close process to chocolate. You should start a business. And I was at that time, which was like 2012, 8 years ago. I was like, no way. Like my parents had just closed down their last shop. It was not on my mind at all. It was nothing that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And like come to like a year and a half ago and I'm starting the business.
Well,
Like,
no, the hardest part is that whole time where you're like going through the mental process of like recognizing it and then maybe thinking about pursuing it. And then you
mhm.
start kind of collecting data, like what do I need? And I know I wrote like on 50 different sticky notes, like lists, like random lists that I never looked at when I actually bought anything.
Of
Uh,
course.
and then to get to that final moment where you're like, am I about to buy this
Yeah,
machine, or am I about to? And then when you realize is like as soon as you do it, it was not nearly as hard as you thought. I mean,
totally.
it's like I don't know. There's not a good metaphor for it, but I felt like there was such a wall that I had to get through, and
Mhm.
ours was an espresso machine because a real espresso machine is expensive. And
Mm.
when we first talked about it, she had talked about it for a long time. My wife, um, for a long time, because she used to work in a coffee shop, and every time we'd get around that espresso machine conversation, I'm like, well, how much are they?
Mm.
And they're 5, 10, 15,000. I'm like, gosh, man, like, I don't know how we're ever going to pay for that.
Yeah.
Uh, it all worked out. A little personal info about it was actually we got delayed on our opening, which actually saved us because we couldn't actually truly start the process of getting what we needed until January. And we were closing in around tax season. I got
Mm.
way more taxes back than normal because we had a kid,
Mm.
which a lot of people wouldn't say is, well, I think most people agree it's a blessing. Some people don't, I'm sure, but it just worked out perfect. Like everything timed out. And I wanted to ask you that about your business. Was it like, it's almost like the moment you like let go and don't try to craft everything perfectly, like
Yeah.
things line up. Like
Yeah.
I had a guy that when I first called him about getting us coffee, um, he immediately was like, yeah, and I've got, bun coffee makers and I know a girl with a machine.
Yeah,
Like it all, you know, it's like the stars align a little bit when you just commit.
totally. Yeah, this is funny. We're having this conversation today because yesterday I spoke to a friend of mine in the city. He's a Vietnamese kid and good friend of mine, and he's thinking about starting up like a, oh man, what do you call it? Rice wine, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, like sake or something.
Kind of, yeah, but like the Vietnamese version of that. He was
Okay.
thinking about doing it, and he asked me a very, very similar question. And what came to mind immediately was just the amount of times that I've made plans up in my mind, and I had only one way of seeing how to do something
Yeah.
until I actually fully committed myself to doing it. And through committing myself to doing it, having open conversations with people about it and being okay with sharing about it and sharing in the fact that I'm not secure about it,
Yeah.
through those conversations and through that full commitment, so many doors have opened up and so many things have showed up for me that would have never been possible to plan for those things to happen.
Yeah.
They were never in the plans.
Yeah. It's weird because it's you hear a lot of talk. I'm sure you've seen the Secret and all this stuff. It's like,
Yeah, definitely.
and I've heard it from like I think there's several big advocates, Conor McGregor and all these people, talk about
Yeah.
all this, just visualization and all this stuff. And I've noticed it's never like quite what you are looking for, but it just works its way out. And every time I start to take too much control over it, it slows me down a little bit, you know. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Kind of
interesting.
he definitely reminds me of another thing, which is I've been doing these seminars. I've done a couple seminar series, and in one of the series, the main topic was about leadership, and we had to create a project, but I was so stuck on wanting to know exactly what the project was going to look like, knowing what every single person in the project was going to be doing. Like I would tell you, hey, you're in charge of the marketing materials, so they're going to look like this. This is how much money we have to spend. I need them done by this time. This is exactly what I want them to look like. Do your job.
Yeah,
And I was so stuck on needing to know every single detail about how the project was going to look and turn out and what everyone's role in the project was going to be until I had a conversation with my one of my group leaders, and she was like, you need to start thinking about leadership as creating a space for collaboration in order to
yeah,
bring other people into the project or process or whatever you're trying to create, creating a space for collaboration so that those people bring their ideas that either whatever you believe in, God or the universe, gave to them that only they have. There are
absolutely.
certain ideas that you have that no one else has. So when you combine those things into a space of open and trusting, safe, creative space, things come out of that that never could have been created by just one of those two people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that opened up a lot for me for my company, just like design wise, letting people design things and saying, I don't have no idea what this is going to look like, and I'm not attached to it looking like anything. So tell me what you think.
Yeah, I was gonna compliment you because I've got your bag right here too, and like the whole thing it looks awesome. I
Thanks, man.
mean, it's like super well balanced. It's simple, and I love that you've got like it's stamped. It's
Yeah.
that's ingenious. We talked about doing that for our cups in the coffee shop, and we never did it.
Love it. You should
Uh,
totally do that. The stamp is so nice on cups.
yeah, and I mean it's got to save money as well because I got just 500 labels for our pitcher packs that we're doing.
Hmm.
It's called a homebrew kit. I don't want to call it a pitcher pack, but
Hmm.
like, gosh, labels are expensive
I know.
to put on everything.
Yeah,
They pay for themselves, obviously, but
totally.
that first big order is
Yeah,
scary.
definitely. We can definitely talk shop about like ordering labels and bags and
Yeah,
supplies and stuff after this for sure. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Um,
but as far as that package goes, like that was all a friend of my girlfriend who's now one of my good friends. She's a graphic designer, art director, and you kind of have to just let people bring in whatever inspiration they have.
It's cool and it's refreshing. Like I said, like that's the word that keeps coming to mind because it's not, you can tell, and in a good way, you can tell that you didn't do it. Like all of my labels so far I've done, I've basically done everything. And what tends to happen is I get OCD about it. I overthink it. It takes too long. It looks too
Hmm.
generic sometimes. Sometimes there's too much going on because I have too much here that I'm trying to put here
Yeah,
as opposed to, plus it saves time to have someone do it.
totally. And you don't have to synthesize and make perfect everything that's in your mind,
Yeah.
um, especially because you're obviously more operations based anyway.
Yeah.
So you need to be focusing on what your strengths are, right? And there are people who are creative out there who that is their strength. Their strength is to take your vision and turn it into something visual and graphic.
Absolutely.
And they've been doing it for so long.
And it's funny you say that because you hit the nail on the head. Like the operations is actually what I like to do. I always had a problem. Like I don't know what I like to do, but I like doing, like, I don't know how to word it. Like I don't want to say I like building businesses like I do, but I like the I would like to have 30 phone calls a day. I'd like to have to respond to 60 emails. I'd like to be stressed out about comparing how much this is to that. Like
Mhm.
figuring out how we can do better search engine optimization. Like that's all the stuff that I like. And it almost doesn't matter as much to what it would be as long as I'm doing just that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's your part of it. That is
Yeah.
where you feel inspired and you do your best. And then, you trying to take some of that energy and inspiration and put it into design.
Yeah.
When someone's been designing, if they're like 35 now, they've been designing since they were in college maybe, and they probably grew up in the doing arts and drawing and stuff. So this person has been expressing their creativity in a visual way for 15, 20 years. And
Yeah.
now, for example, me, like now I'm going to go in and try to create my own package.
It's tough.
Why would I do that? You know,
Yeah.
I've been battling that myself too. I totally get it.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to do everything from I built our website, all of our logos, all of every email, every phone, and I think the best way to grow something is to have more people, obviously. And I heard a brilliant thing the other day from a guy named Brad Lee. He owns the Lightspeed Training. I don't know if
Mm,
you've seen him
I
before or not. He's kind of
no.
getting on that scene of business advice and stuff. He's kind of stepping into that world. And he was
Mm,
saying his goal was 10 grand. And every time he'd hit 10 grand, he'd take 5 grand and hire somebody.
nice.
And then he was quicker every time. It was quicker to rebound and
Mm,
to do more. Next thing you know, there was 60, 70 employees, and which hyper growth isn't what I'm looking for. But like
mm.
you said, I mean, you have somebody, I have all this media I want to do. I really need an editor.
Yeah.
I really need, because all that stuff is very time consuming and can take a lot
But
from you.
there is a certain amount of it in the beginning, not to like be totally hypocritical.
Yeah.
There's a certain cost in the beginning to all of those things. So wherever you can save cost in the beginning in terms of growth, it does make sense to do,
For sure.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's been the exciting thing for me because we're not at a level yet where I'm totally consumed with administration or
Sure.
the running of the business. I'm still able to do that. And also, I think it's important to establish a tone on everything that you want
Hmm.
someone else to follow.
Totally.
Um, I don't know how much time you got, but I did want to ask you a couple other things.
Time is it?
Um,
I got a bit more time. Yeah.
okay. I wanted to ask you when you did your podcast with
Mhm.
Steel Mace,
Steel Mace Nation. Yeah.
Steel
Fred
Mace
Moore.
Nation.
Yep.
You touched in the beginning about supply chain issues, um, and I didn't quite get enough, and I didn't finish the podcast, so it might have been answered later on. But
Mm.
I thought that was really interesting because I know with coffee, you know, free trade and all this stuff goes hand in hand with how people buy coffee, and I did want to touch base on that and what your thoughts were.
Sure, on about supply chain in general in the industry.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna give you what my thoughts are right now on the subject, and then you can just guide me whichever way you want if I'm not answering the question.
Okay. Yeah.
So, for example, let me start from here. The last coffee that I released, my second coffee from Nicaragua, comes from what you'd consider like a micro lot or a nano lot. It comes from one family's farm, a husband and a wife, and they have two kids, and they work that farm, and those are the only people that are producing that coffee. And
Wow.
the beans in that bag and the beans in the bags that have come from that farm are only from that farm. They are not. You can get other coffees. The bigger, non-organic, very cheap coffee will more than likely come from a place like Brazil or Vietnam, where they collect tens or 20 or 30 different farms and pile them all together and create a lot, and then all of that coffee gets pushed out together and
Gotcha.
manufactured together. This is coming from one single farm. So the reason why I say that is because sometimes it's expensive, too expensive for these people to get all the certifications like organic, rainforest alliance,
Mhm.
bird friendly. There are all these certifications, and a lot of the times these small farmers don't have the money to pay for the certifications. So I, as a buyer, as a roaster, don't have those certifications on my bag. But that doesn't necessarily mean that my coffee is not as sustainable or traceable
Yeah.
or environmentally friendly as the person who has Rainforest Alliance and USDA organic on their bag. There's a little bit of a gray area in packaging and sourcing in terms of that, because the average consumer, for example, in Virginia, maybe not so much in Brooklyn, but maybe in like some of these smaller towns, if they see a bag on their shelf and they see my coffee with no logos on it, no USDA organic, blah, 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 and then they see a bag that has Rainforest Alliance and organic, they're going to think that that coffee, the second one, is more sustainable and more environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
And in some cases that's true, but in some cases that's not true.
It's like farmers market versus USDA organic and
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Perfect example. Perfect example. So that's a very interesting part of the supply chain conversation. What exactly is fair trade? What exactly is direct trade? What do these things mean? Are they just marketing materials?
yeah.
Um, how much
Truthfully,
are
I know I'm lost on a lot of that sometimes. When I'm looking to order beans, and I'm like, I need to Google a little bit before
yeah.
I get into that.
So someone in my position as a roaster, as a coffee buyer, and eventually you're sounds like you're probably on your way to eventually roasting your own coffee whenever that will be. You're going to work probably with importers and exporters who are working directly with farms. Eventually you'll work directly with farms, but you'll be working with importers and exporters who are working in countries. And there are some importers that have whose coffees are much more traceable. They have much more information on the coffees. They have these things called farm gate prices, which is
Yeah.
how much the farmers are getting paid.
Wow.
So not only do you know how much you're paying for the bag of coffee, but you know how much the farmer is getting paid for a pound of coffee or a kilo of coffee, however they
Yeah.
measure it. So there is a lot of information out there, but and this is there's a group, there's an organization in the country in the coffee industry called the Specialty Coffee Association of America, and they're pushing for this traceability. They're pushing for farm gate pricing,
Yeah.
but the vast majority of coffee purchased around the world, this information is not available for, and we're talking about a small segment of the market. We're also, in one of the richest countries in the world, and we're talking about specialty craft goods and markets where people are spending 17, 18, 19 US dollars on coffee.
Yeah.
So, to keep it in perspective, we're talking about this, but we're talking about it kind of in isolation
For sure.
in a way, but it's still important to have the conversation because we're trying to set the tone for the industry and hope that trends will follow behind in the way that McDonald's is now selling veggie burgers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a couple key things that got pointed out months prior. I think a
Mhm.
certain documentary seemed to push the drive on all that. Uh,
Yeah.
and you see it everywhere. And you're right. It really takes, it's not one moment, but there is like a tipping point. You know, if there's enough of it there, there's enough awareness around something, people will start to, you know, understand that and recognize it as opposed to just hearing for the first time.
And hopefully demand it. And not only demand it,
Exactly.
but what is also important and is going to drive the demand is going to be people's understanding and people's acceptance of the fact that these things are not supposed to be $8 a pound.
Yeah.
These things are not supposed to be $8 to $10 a pound. It can't be. How am I supposed to run a business on zero margin? How are farmers supposed to get paid? If you think that farmers are supposed to get paid well for their work, then
Yeah.
it doesn't make the pricing structure for coffee that's $6, $7, $8 a pound doesn't make any sense. So
No.
you have to get people to understand the work and the process and get them to be okay with spending a little bit more. And
Yeah.
18, $19 a bag sounds, for me, in the beginning when I was thinking about pricing, I was going to price at $14 a bag or $15 a bag. First of all, I wouldn't be making any money. I'd be
Yeah.
making $1 a bag. And second of all, if you break it down, 300, do like a tiny, I'm just going to do a tiny bit of math.
Yeah.
If in a 12-ounce bag, there's 340 grams
Mm-hmm.
of coffee. If each cup of coffee is 20 grams of coffee, that's 17 times 20 brings you to 340. If 17 cups of coffee you can get out of a 340 gram bag,
Yeah.
if
For
you're
sure.
paying $17 for a bag, you're paying $1 for your cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You're paying more than that at McDonald's, or you're paying more than that at a bodega in New York City. You're paying $1.25 at the bodega.
For sure.
What are
Folger
you getting?
K cup.
Yeah, exactly? You're
Yeah.
getting the cheapest coffee that they can possibly buy, which
For
they're
sure.
paying market rate for. Whereas these specialty roasters who are pushing this awareness and the sustainability are paying 2 to 3 times more that amount, maybe even more in some cases.
Yeah.
So once I started to really understand the math and how much a cup of coffee cost, it makes sense. And
Yeah.
I'm okay with charging it.
That's the biggest hurdle with being in a place like I am because people drink Folgers. So, and not knocking them, you know, but that's what they think is like. They probably think that's expensive, and it's not because of, you know, there's a lot of reasons for it, but really, the first complaint about any coffee shop is, I mean, I can't pay several dollars a cup, which I
Yeah,
will say, as now operating coffee shop, there's some definite price gouging on cups of coffee. There's
sure.
plenty of room, even on a $2 16-ounce cup of coffee. There's plenty of room. But
Sure.
as far as I know, the first time I bought, there's a roaster that was supposedly, well, not supposedly, at one time was ranked in the top 12 in the country, about
Mm,
30 minutes away. And I bought
nice.
my first bag from them, and it was, you know, mid 20s.
Mm,
Whoa, you know, when I first bought it, I'm like, holy cow, didn't know it'd
yeah.
be that much. And then, like you said, as soon as I did a little bit of mental math, realized that they just roasted it yesterday, and that
Yeah.
it, you know, ethically sourced.
Hmm.
It says exactly where it's from, and at least as much as I know about it. But you think
Totally.
of all the processes to come here, and it's 20 some bucks. It's fair for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It just begs a deeper conversation about what we value as a society and how much people actually think about the things that they're buying and, how much thought goes into purchase decisions and, what people think is important, what jobs people think are important. Are the people who supply us with things like our fruits and our vegetables and our meat and our coffees and our teas, are those jobs important, and are we willing to pay people to do them and to build a good life on those jobs?
We should be, right?
you know that's the question that comes to my mind.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that answered any of the
No,
source
that did.
question.
Because when you said that, I wasn't sure how deep. I could tell that you wanted to touch on that, and there wasn't enough there for me to like fully grasp the whole
Yeah,
concept. So yeah, absolutely, you answered that far
sure.
beyond what I thought that would be. Uh,
Yeah.
and I agree. I think that's part of our job, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I do think that is our job, is to support those supply chains that we think are working and that are supporting people that we think need to be supported.
Yeah,
And some of that comes from what I told you in the beginning, that my grandparents were farmers in southern Italy. So I have a certain respect for people who work the land.
exactly.
I,
That's
I
all.
know the I know the work that goes into it, and I know the care that goes into it too. It's not just work; it's also a care.
Yeah, and
You know,
that goes back to the immigrant mentality that we talked about earlier. There's real focus and care of every single task
totally.
from the bottom, and then once it crosses our border, it
Yeah.
becomes a label and a marketing skew, and no one really cares.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So I've got really one big, final question for you, and that's, what do you want to see? Like, how do you, not like a classic interview question, how do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years, but what are you wanting to gain out of all this? I know you want to bring awareness to that, but also there's something personal to go along with it, or you wouldn't be in business for yourself. And
Mhm.
what are your goals as far as Graziella Coffee Company?
I'm constantly in the process of trying to figure out exactly what it is that I want to be doing
Yeah,
with the company. I know I can go like in a couple different ways for you in terms of the business and where I want it to be and what I want it to look like. I want it to look like. Are you familiar with the setup of brew pubs where they brew the beer there, but they also sell beer and they sell food?
absolutely. There's one down the road from here.
Nice. Okay, so there are a couple roasteries that are set up in that way. There's one in Brooklyn that there's two in Brooklyn that I really love. One is called East One,
Yeah,
um, and there's another one called City of Saints that's in Bushwick. Um, and they have their roasting operation in the warehouse. East One is a bit more upscale. It's a little bit more intertwined with their restaurant and their cafe. But City of Saints is like really hardcore warehouse, big roaster, all their green beans, very much like supply chain part of the company.
yeah.
And then in front, they have probably like 4 tables with like 12 chairs. And they have a little coffee bar, and they have one little case where they sell donuts and sweets. And it's not a coffee shop. It's a manufacturing space that also happens to sell coffee.
That's
And
awesome.
as far as like a shop goes, that's kind of like my dream, my vision is to have that as a space. Whether or not I have more coffee shops, I have no idea. But
Yeah,
like I know I want to have that roasting space with the little serving little things. I don't want it to be super intense. I don't want to have like 4 baristas working with a cook. Like I want to bring in a couple pastries a day, and I want to have one barista maybe hanging out, serving a couple cups of coffee today, and I want it to be like a place that people want to take an adventure to get to. It's like I don't know, a pilgrimage in a way.
yeah.
But, I mean, not saying anything special about my coffee or anything like that, but like that's like kind of how I view it.
No, well, I'll tell you right now, to say something special about your coffee. I don't know that it got the highest ranking so far on my show, but I did want to tell you that it's my favorite. And
Mm,
sometimes the scores get skewed because when you'll say something's an 8, and then 4 or 5 days later you do something else and it's better, but you
yeah.
can't keep inching closer to 10. And
No, no.
um,
It's like Portnoy with the one bite,
it's exactly, and that's not what inspired me to do coffee review. Coffee for the people,
Mm.
is what I call it. Actually, Wine Library TV did, because it
Oh no.
inspired a beer review show that I did, which I stopped doing. And then I happened to see Portnoy doing one bite pizza
Yeah.
review, and it kind of reignited that, and I thought that would be a great addition. Um,
Yeah.
your coffee, I haven't tried everything. This Nicaraguan coffee, um, it had the most broad in a good way, like flavor spectrum. Like I
Mm,
don't know how to say it. There was so many different little flavors, and none
yeah.
of them were too much. And actually, I brought it to work, and these are I've brought many coffees to work and let people taste, and that's how I let them taste some of the stuff that I'm working on. When I made that, I think I got like 15 or 16. Like, that's good coffee, you know.
Nice. That's
Um,
so good to hear. Yeah, yeah.
It was very good, and I've actually had to put it away because I didn't want to run through it, so I might have to restock up.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, just as a side note, that's so we only bought one 170-kilo bag of that coffee. So that coffee's gone. So I
Oh,
won't be able to get that coffee in for another like 3 or 4 or 5 months.
yeah,
Which is kind of
that's
the fun
awesome.
thing about coffee, but thank you for the compliments. Just got to shout out Ben from Gold Mountain Coffee Growers. He is the importer that we're working with. He works basically solely in Nicaragua. He
Wow.
has, one farm that him and his company run themselves, and then he works with a bunch of other micro lots, a bunch of other families, um, to help them increase their production, increase their quality, and just really get those farmers more money for their work.
Yeah,
Um, so
well,
he's
that's
a
such a
special
cool
guy in
call
that.
to have such good coffee come out of it. I mean, how couldn't they get like they deserve to be paid more? I mean, it's the cream of the crop, really. You know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Going back to the pricing conversation too, I think like the amount that I paid for that green versus what I charged for it, there are people charging for green that same price. There are people charging for those bags like $4 or $5 more. I
Yeah.
charge That's where the pricing conversation is so interesting because there are people who are charging 22, $24 for a bag like that for the
Absolutely.
same
Yeah.
for that same quality of coffee, but being it's kind of reminds me of when I was a full-time personal trainer for like 2.5 years before I started doing this. I mean, probably more like 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
slowly transitioning out. But in the beginning, I was so afraid to tell people what the prices were because the gym that I work at Equinox. The gym sets the prices, so I don't get to tell people this is my price and I can offer you a little bit less. The gym says the sessions are $120 an hour, and that's what I charge. And in
Yeah.
the beginning, I was so afraid to charge that. I was so afraid to tell people the price. Whereas now, I have so much more confidence in my ability that I'm like, hey, listen, this is the price. You want to train or no? Kind of.
Yeah.
That's the way the conversation goes. And I'm feeling a little bit in coffee right now, like I did in the beginning of personal training, where I'm like, this is my coffee. I know I could probably get like $22 a bag for it, but I'm not too confident in my abilities. So
Yeah.
here it is, 19. You know?
I know for sure, and it's we're working on our homebrew, and
Mhm.
it's a work in progress. And I know there's pretty much two Keurig and Starbucks pretty much hold the gauntlet as far as like homebrew, cold brew stuff goes. There's really not a whole lot else as far as seeing stuff on the shelf, and they've got it priced so well that it
Yeah.
does not make sense. I'm like, man, how do they sell it for $10? And I actually, my mother had came by to visit yesterday, and I was telling her about it, and she's like, "Well, how much is it?" And immediately I'm like,
Scared to tell her.
"Yeah," but I'm not scared to post it or whatever. But like her,
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh well,
$18.
yeah." And
Yeah.
actually, I'm still kind of working on that. We still got a little bit of time. I'm truthfully, I'm okay even if I lose money on the first 1,000 boxes, just as long as the quality is where I want it. I want an experience more than I do a monetary value. Of course, I have monetary goals, but you know,
Yeah.
it's tough to do both. Provide quality and make money, and that's actually what I admire a whole lot about what you were saying about having your roasting and a coffee bar and a small like one barista. It's not really after the money. Like really the coffee shop part of that wouldn't bring in that much money,
Mhm.
but it raises the quality of the experience so much that
Totally.
it would keep people, coming back. And it's different than just a regular, going to get a coffee somewhere and looking at your iPhone, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think there's a flip side to that point there, which is I know I want to be of service to people in some way, and I know I'll eventually figure out in what way that I will have an impact and we will have an impact. So maybe at some point, limiting growth and not focusing enough on monetary and profit is actually limiting the amount of impact that can be had.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if there if there's work that needs to be done and there's change that needs to be made and it's going to cost a certain amount of money to get it done, then I don't want to say it's your responsibility because it's not, but
But I
you know what I mean? In a
I
way, it's almost your responsibility to be in charge of the growth of the business in order to meet those things that need to be done.
I think that might be my favorite thing said in this whole podcast. It really reminds me that I don't want to reference more people, but I had heard, I'm sure you know who it is, Grant Cardone.
Yeah, definitely.
I had heard Grant Cardone say one time that, and this is a little different view, but that not making more money is the most selfish thing you can do.
I heard that before.
And
When you said that, I was shocked.
yeah, and I was like, "What?" You know, it is. And then the more that I actually entertain that thought, the more it makes sense. And the same thing with your business. I mean, it's like I have a 6-month-old daughter. If I'm okay with just doing this, maybe I'm okay with it, but is she okay with it?
Mm-hmm.
Is her future going to be okay with it?
Yeah.
Is my business going to be okay with it if I don't take it to where it could be and spend the extra money on that roaster, or, you know,
Totally.
maybe
And
go to another location that really helps, you know.
and then is the lack of growth then going to impact the way that you feel, about the business and about yourself and financially? And then is that going to impact the relationships that you have with people? Maybe it won't. I don't know. I was listening to another podcast yesterday. Of course, Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you familiar with the therapist Brene Brown?
I feel like I've listened to her on Joe Rogan's podcast to reference another podcast or like Podcast Deep. But yeah, I have heard of her. I can't remember exactly what her specialty was.
I wonder, it's funny. I wonder how often people on podcasts reference other podcasts.
A lot. And there's probably going to be one of those. It's like dudes who watch podcasts. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Dude,
We're turning into a meme right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's important though. They're talking about the fine line between like self-awareness and acceptance and complacency.
Yeah.
Like being okay with yourself, but not to the point where you're not striving for something greater. And like that line looks differently for everyone, but just that conversation is fascinating. I was kind of blown away yesterday because I'm more of a perfectionist, overthinking, overanalyzing, over criticizing of a self kind of person. So I lean more toward that end of the spectrum rather than self-awareness and self-acceptance.
Yeah, I feel like well, everyone likes to think they're self-aware, right? I agree with you. It's like I kind of have that in my pocket. I feel like there's just some other things that could use my attention. And one thing is being gracious is the hardest thing for me because I always, there has to be another step. There has to be another thing. And I always, I didn't even celebrate in any way, not that I should, but when our business opened or anything. Because and I wanted that so bad. And then when it was there, it was like, oh, well, that's not good enough. We need to, and that's a good thing. But, I listened to, I got enlightened the other day, and I'm just about to add to this meme one final time.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
It was on Mike Tyson's hot boxing.
Nice.
He had Francis Ngannou, the UFC heavyweight.
Yeah, definitely.
And I just watched I'm a big fight fan. I just watched the fights the other night. And, he's a big, scary 6'4", 260-pound man. And
by the way, Tony Ferguson got absolutely destroyed.
I lost money on that. That's the first time I've bet. I made a video. I was inspired by Barstool to do some kind of betting video.
Nice.
Bet money on the whole card, and I lost 6 fights. So Ngannou came through.
Nice.
I couldn't believe Tony Ferguson lost. That's a whole podcast in of itself.
Yeah, definitely.
But Ngannou said to Mike Tyson, he said that 6 years ago, he had migrated from Africa and he was in Morocco trying to get into Spain. And he was living in the woods, eating people's trash, hiding from immigration so he could get into Spain.
Wow.
And when he finally did get into Spain, he went straight to France for the most part. And he was homeless in France. And he said it was like heaven. And, he had no idea how he was going to do anything. And I'm like, man, 6 years ago, like I was in a way better position than eating trash in Morocco.
Whoa.
And then I was like, man, like you really got to have gratitude, like big time, because even though those situations breed success, a lot of those situations don't, But yeah, that was like the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever heard. To see this big guy be so nice and have such a humbling story,
That's amazing. I'll have to check that podcast out.
You should. And Mike Tyson kind of rants on him a little bit there at the end, and you kind of wish he'd let Ngannou finish. But
okay.
Oh man,
you there?
Yeah. Something just happened. Sorry about that. I guess someone tried to FaceTime me, and it linked through on my MacBook right at the right at the end. It like shifted my screen. I thought it cut the call off.
Oh, good. All right, we're still here.
Sorry about that.
No, all good. So touching on that point, one last point that Tim Ferriss and Brene Brown were talking about yesterday was, she was saying, in a life, in a time where so many extraordinary things are going on,
yeah,
it's so hard to congratulate ourselves on anything but extraordinary things as well. So like you were talking about your business and how you were so excited about it opening, but for you, maybe that's just not extraordinary enough, and the challenge for someone who's like more in that perfectionist doing self-critical situation is, how do you give yourself credit for what you've done? And how do you give yourself credit for being an ordinary person, not being Michael Jordan?
Exactly. It's anytime you hit some kind of success, there's someone that's just so many leaps and bounds ahead, McGregor making $80 million a fight, and you're like, man, that's like light years away.
Yeah. And
you just did something really cool, but it's because we're in a society where we compare that all the time, even if you don't think you're comparing, and usually we do it from the outside looking in, and we really don't see in, you know what I mean? Our social media accounts do that. I'm sure people have like a perceived idea of me or shop or whatever before actually talking to me, the same way I did of you, and not in a bad way or a good, just it's a different perspective,
Sure.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. I got to listen to that podcast.
Yeah, great podcast. I mean, he's great. She's great. Definitely.
Yeah, that Tim Ferriss's podcast is awesome.
Legend.
Well, I wanted to let you, if you have any final thoughts, man, if you want to say what you've been working on, what your ats are, we're going to add all that in.
Sure. Yeah. That would be wicked helpful. You have my Instagram already, at Graziella Coffee Company. I'll spell it quick, Graziella Coffee Company on Instagram. That's pretty much the main place to get into contact with us. Shoot me an email, shoot me a DM. I reply to everything. I only have 1,000 followers, so it's not that hard.
Well, welcome to the club. I don't even have that many on. I think about 30 on Kaffa and 60 on the cafe. I've got more.
2,000 on your personal account. If you told everybody on your personal account what you were doing, you'd have like a couple hundred. When I did that on my account, I only have 600 followers. When I posted on my personal account, I immediately got like 250 followers.
Yeah. And I don't even know how I have 2,000 on there. That's ridiculous.
High number.
I get like 40 likes though. So
they're all robots.
Yeah, I'm sure there's bots.
So that's Instagram. And I just, we sold out of our second coffee like 2 weeks ago. Third coffee, I'm waiting for the labels to show up any day. As soon as they're up, I'm going to take pictures of the bags, and then the third coffee will be released. I'm buying the fourth and fifth coffee now, so hoping to have 2 coffees on sale at the same time instead of just one option.
Yeah.
I'm also going to be starting up a subscription service.
That's
Um,
awesome.
I got some artwork being worked on by my friend, so I have mugs that'll be like, I'm friends with a girl who owns a handcrafted ceramic shop in Brooklyn. So
Wow.
we're going to collaborate on handmade mugs. Just waiting for the artwork to come in. The mug should be ready in about a month. Working on putting some t-shirts together or long sleeve shirts. I'm not gonna like bombard everybody with merchandise. I just want like a nice mug that people can drink out of that's really beautiful,
Yeah.
and then like a t-shirt that I think is really cool. And I'm gonna go with those two things. So those should be coming out eventually. Some sticker packs, and then a subscription service for the coffees coming, 1 or 2 bags or 3 bags a month. Be able to sign up for a subscription.
Very
I got
cool.
I got a dark roast coming, which people have been asking for. Um, yeah, a lot of stuff in the works. Just trying to keep the momentum going through this whole thing.
Yeah. And it's probably actually refreshing to everybody. I didn't even ask you how that was with you being in New York. I know it's
Oh well, I actually snuck out of New York. Our friends live up in Woodstock, New York, which is
okay.
like 2 hours north of the city.
Yeah.
So we were able to get out of Brooklyn. Thankfully, we live in like a 300 square foot studio apartment. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, we were very, very grateful to be able to get out of the city. So we're
Yeah.
hanging out.
It's such a different environment because here where I am, I think there's been 4 cases.
Yeah.
And here it doesn't exist. I mean, people
Mm.
still are taking the precautions and everything, but I don't know anyone that's had it where as there it's like you're trying to get out before everything.
Yeah.
You know.
And the fear of it was even scarier than the thing itself, you
Yeah,
know, just like the energy that it had when it came.
yeah,
But
for sure,
it's
for
good.
sure.
It's been good to get out. It's been good to be out of the city, and it's been good to make sales through all this and keep working.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
well,
You
I
have a
don't.
website as well, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. GraziellaCoffee.com.
Awesome. And we'll
Yep.
make sure all that's posted up. And um,
Cool, man.
yeah, well, dude,
Nice.
really appreciate you being on here, taking the time. I know, like I said, I blew you up with information on the phone before we even talked. So,
No, it
um,
was great. It turned out better than I ever could have imagined. These are actually turning out to be really fun. I was opposed to doing the podcasts at first and the conversations, but like they're great. It was great talking to you, and we have so much in common. And it's one more comment about technology, which is like such a big conversation nowadays. I've had so much fun meeting and building community through Instagram
yeah,
that I never would have imagined.
yeah. If used the right way,
It's
it's
amazing.
eye opening. Yeah, I mean, and like with this, like I said, I would never. There's no guy that lives within a couple of miles I can go talk to about
Mhm.
the. I mean, it's very slim pickings, and
Mm.
it's so cool to be able to just link up like this and not, have to go through the old way of I'd have to drive up there and sit
Yeah.
down.
Wow.
Crazy.
No, this was great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy.
Absolutely. We should do it again one day in the future, man.
Definitely. Let's do it in a couple months.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I'm gonna do I think I'm gonna start doing just for fun like some Instagram live conversations on my Instagram. So I'll shoot you a message outside of here and we'll talk about that. We'll try to link up for like 20 minutes and then just have a quick
Yeah,
conversation on Instagram live.
for sure. I'd love
Maybe
that, man.
get you some followers and get
Yeah.
me some of your followers. It'll be good.
Yeah, I need it, man.
You got to post on your personal.
I know.
I'm
I
waiting
got to
for
pull
them.
the
Huh?
trigger.
Pull the trigger.
I will.
Immediate couple hundred followers.
Yeah. Let's hope. Or maybe 40, like
Maybe. Yeah, like the likes.
the 40 real ones.
Exactly. Hey, better than nothing.
That's right, man.
All right,
All
man.
right. Well, I appreciate it, man. And you be safe out there. And we'll do this again very soon.
Definitely. Looking forward to it, man.